The bill shouldn't have stood out. It was just $5, damp from the drizzle outside, lying face up on the glossy supermarket floor between the entrance and the row of metal shopping carts. People walked past it without seeing, or maybe seeing and pretending not to. The automatic doors hissed open and shut, dragging in cold air and muddy footprints. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and then Daniel stepped in, shook the rain off his shoulders, and saw it. He stopped mid-stride, not because $5 would change his life, but because on that Tuesday evening it meant one simple, immediate thing. His son could have the chocolate milk he kept asking for. $5 meant you didn't have to choose between bread and bus fare. $5 meant the gap between almost enough and enough disappeared for one grocery run. He bent to pick it up. The security camera above the door caught everything. The way he looked around first. Instinctive, not guilty, but careful. The way people who don't have excess money are careful. He glanced toward the customer service desk, toward the self-checkout line, toward the wet footprints leading in. No one was standing back, patting pockets, looking panicked. Just shoppers, bored out of their minds, scrolling their phones, dragging kids. He rubbed the bill between his fingers. Real, slightly wrinkled, the corner torn. He could have folded it, slipped it into his wallet, and no one would have known. No manager, no cashier, no security guy in the back room watching the monitors. $5 in a world that forgot how far $5 could go. But that wasn't who he was. Daniel was 33, drywall dust still on his boots from a job that paid late again. He was the kind of father who counted coins inside his fist before getting in line so his son wouldn't see how close to empty his wallet was. The kind of man who had a cracked phone screen, a truck with more rust than paint, and a custody schedule taped to the fridge like it was holy scripture. His son, Mason, was 6 and in love with dinosaurs, chocolate milk, and the small vending machine near the supermarket exit that sold sticky hands and plastic rings. They were in that phase of life where every errand was a math problem. So when he straightened up with the $5 bill in his hand, he didn't just see money, he saw a choice. And choices, small, invisible ones, were the spine of his life now. He walked to the customer service counter. The woman behind it was half distracted, stapling papers. "Can I help you?" she asked without looking up. "Yeah," Daniel said, lifting the bill. "Someone dropped this right by the door. You got anyone missing cash?" She blinked, like she hadn't expected that sentence. $5? "Yeah." She tilted her head. "You can keep it, you know. I know," he said. "But maybe it's not nothing to whoever dropped it." That was the first thing that made the footage interesting. Not dramatic, not heroic. Just strange enough that the security guy in the back room would later rewind it. Who turns in $5? The woman shrugged, took the bill, and wrote something on a sticky note. Found $5 near entrance. She taped it to the side of the counter like it was a lost dog flyer. "If someone asks, we'll have it," she said. Daniel nodded. He could have walked away. Story over. Man does the right thing. But life, on that day, wasn't done testing how far he would go. Because as he turned, he saw him. A kid, thin, hoodie too big, shoes wet, hovering by the sliding doors. Eyes on the legal lottery scratch-off machine and the change tray underneath. Not the kind of kid who came to the supermarket with parents and wandered off. The kind who came alone. The kind who counted quarters like some people count followers. Maybe 12, maybe 13. Trying to look casual, but every few seconds he eyed the counter like he was working up to something. Daniel recognized the look. He'd worn it himself at 15 when his mom sent him to pay the light bill, and he didn't have enough. The kid stepped forward, hesitant. Excuse me," he said to the customer service woman. "I think I dropped $5. The universe has a cruel sense of timing. The woman glanced at the note, then at Daniel, then at the kid. "What color was it?" she asked, joking, but the boy didn't smile. "It was just 5, he said. "My mum sent me to get bread and eggs. I had it in my hand right there." He pointed to the wet floor by the door. It fell. Something in his voice cracked on the word mum. Not dramatic, just a tiny fracture of embarrassment and urgency. Because $5 to a kid on an errand isn't $5. It's proof you can be trusted. It's the difference between coming home with groceries and coming home with excuses. The woman looked at Daniel again, like she wanted him to confirm. He nodded once. "Yeah," he said. "He's telling the truth." She handed the bill back to the boy. "Here. Lucky someone turned it in." "Thank you," the kid said, clutching it like a life raft. Then he added, almost too quiet, "I didn't want to get in trouble." That would have been enough to make a decent story. But the camera didn't stop there, because while the woman chatted with another customer, while the boy turned to leave, Daniel watched him. Watched the way he counted the money again before putting it in his pocket. Watched the way he glanced out at the rain, like the walk home was long. Watched the oversized hoodie, the wet cuffs, the flicker of relief so big for something so small. And then Daniel did something no one expected. He reached into his wallet, thin, tired, nothing but a debit card he prayed wouldn't get declined, and a crumpled receipt from the gas station, and pulled out a second bill. Not 5, a 10. He folded it once and walked after the boy. "Hey," he said. The kid stopped. "You dropped this too." Daniel lied gently, holding out the 10. The kid frowned. "I didn't. It was with the 5, Daniel said, like it was simple, like it was already his. "You must have dropped both." He could have just said, "Here, take this." But pride is a fragile thing, especially in kids trying to be useful. Daniel knew that. Giving it as a mistake meant the boy could accept it without feeling like a charity case. The boy's eyes widened. "Really? Really?" He took it slowly, reverent, like it might disappear. "Thanks," he said, and this time the gratitude in his voice was full, not embarrassed. "Really? Thanks." The camera caught that, too, the transfer, the kid leaving, the man staying behind with nothing. It caught the tiny, almost invisible smile on Daniel's face, the kind that says, "I know what that bill will do. It'll let him buy everything on the list. Maybe even let him keep the change and feel like a hero when he goes home." Then it caught the part that made it go viral. Because after the boy left, Daniel looked back at the counter, at the sticky note, at the woman, and he took a breath like someone bracing against cold truth. He didn't have to check his wallet to know what had just happened. He'd given away the money he'd budgeted too tight. He'd shifted his own math. So instead of heading for the aisles, he walked to the far corner of the store, where the security cameras didn't usually capture emotion, just returns, price checks, bored shoppers. He pulled out his phone, stared at his banking app, winced. Then he did something vulnerable in the middle of a supermarket. He laughed, soft, disbelieving, like, "Of course." That was the moment the security guard later replayed. Because there is a particular sound people make when they do the right thing that hurts them a little. And the camera had heard it. He didn't know the footage existed yet, the silent witness of that small act looping on a screen in the back of the store. But by the time Daniel stepped out into the parking lot, the night had already recorded its own version of him, a man caught between scarcity and grace, doing something decent in a world that wasn't built to reward it. The drizzle had stopped. The air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and fried food from the takeout place across the street. The truck sat under a flickering light, paint peeling, one door creaking when he opened it. He sank into the seat, wiped rain from his hair, and let out a long sigh that came from somewhere deeper than fatigue. He didn't regret it. Not exactly. but there was a dull ache in his chest, the familiar one that comes when kindness collides with lack. The dashboard clock blinked 8:47 p.m. Mason would already be in bed at his ex's apartment, probably dreaming about dinosaurs or chocolate milk. Daniel had promised to bring a treat next time. He rubbed his thumb against the steering wheel, trying not to think about the $10 bill that could have covered it. He started the truck. The heater coughed out cold air first, then the faint smell of dust. The windshield wipers squealed once before settling into rhythm. As he pulled out, he saw the boy again, walking along the curb, clutching a small paper bag to his chest. The kid didn't notice him. He was too busy shielding the bag from the rain, careful, almost protective. Something in that image, thin arms, determination, small victories, lodged itself in Daniel's mind. He couldn't shake it, even after he'd turned onto the main road. At a red light, he found himself thinking about how the smallest things could ripple, how a found $5 could become a story no one would ever tell, except someone was watching. Inside the store, the night shift security guard, Trevor, leaned over the monitors. He'd seen thefts, arguments, a proposal near the frozen aisle once, but this was new. He'd watched Daniel pick up the bill, hesitate, hand it in, then give more than he'd found. It was too sincere to ignore. The camera had no sound, but the gestures said enough. The quick look around, the calm nod, the laugh that wasn't about humor, but about humanity. Trevor rewound it, played it again, and again. The guy didn't even know he was being recorded. By midnight, Trevor had clipped the footage, labeled it, "Man returns $5 and gives away $10. He didn't plan on posting it, he just wanted to show the morning manager that people still did good things. But the morning manager showed her teenage daughter, who posted it on her social media. By lunch the next day, 500,000 people had seen a tired man in a gray jacket hand hope to a kid in a hoodie. But Daniel didn't know that yet. He spent the next morning at a construction site, balancing on scaffolds, measuring drywall, letting the muscle memory of work drown out the static in his head. Around noon, his phone buzzed. It was Grace, his sister, the only person who still called him during work hours. "You're internet famous," she said. "What? You haven't seen it? Hold on. I'll send the link." A few seconds later, his cracked screen lit up with a video captioned, "Single dad finds $5 on the ground. What he does next will make you believe in people again." He watched it with his gloves still on. The footage was grainy, black and white. It showed him entering the supermarket, picking up the bill, handing it over, and then following the kid. The camera angle shifted. Another feed caught him outside near the vending machines, handing the 10. The comments scrolled faster than he could read. Faith in humanity restored. That's what being a real man looks like. He didn't know anyone was watching. More people like him. Please. Daniel stared at it, speechless. His co-workers gathered around, craning their necks. "Dude," one said, "that's you, isn't it? You're like good news trending guy." "Guess so," he muttered, tucking the phone back into his pocket. But his pulse was racing. It wasn't embarrassment. It was something closer to disbelief. People didn't celebrate drywallers who lived paycheck to paycheck. They didn't notice men like him unless something went wrong. And now, over $5, strangers were calling him a hero. By evening, the video had crossed 1 million views. Reporters messaged him, brands emailed him. Strangers asked for his Cash App to donate to a good dad. He didn't know what to do with any of it. Fame felt surreal and fragile, like standing under a spotlight that could shut off at any second. That night, Mason saw the clip on TV, one of those Good News of the Week segments. "Dad," he shouted, pointing at the screen. "That's you, you're famous." Daniel smiled, lifting him onto his lap. "Yeah, guess I am. Why'd you give the boy your money?" Mason asked. Because he needed it, Daniel said simply. But you needed it too. Daniel hesitated, then said, sometimes helping someone else fills you up more than keeping it. Mason thought about it, serious, like sharing toys. Exactly like that. Later, when Mason fell asleep, Daniel sat by the window, scrolling through the messages, thousands of them. People telling him his act made them cry, made them rethink, made them feel less alone. Some confessed that they'd been the kid once. Others said they'd been the man who walked past. He hadn't planned any of it. But the world had needed that story, and somehow it had chosen him. Days passed. Cameras showed up at his door. A local talk show invited him to speak. The store gave him a gift card and framed the original sticky note from the counter. The kid in the hoodie was never found, though the store's comment section filled with guesses. Daniel accepted the attention politely, but something inside him stayed quiet. Viral moments fade, he knew. People love miracles, not maintenance. What mattered to him wasn't the video, it was the fact that Mason saw it. That maybe, someday, when Knife cornered him into a hard choice, he'd remember his father's laugh under those flickering lights. Still, something about the whole thing nagged at him. 2 weeks later, he stopped by the same supermarket again. Same shift, same smell of disinfectant and popcorn from the small kiosk near the exit. The woman at the customer service desk recognized him immediately. "You're our celebrity," she said with a grin. "The Good Samaritan." He laughed, shaking his head. "Just a guy buying milk." As he turned to leave, something caught his eye. An envelope taped to the counter. The same place where that sticky note had been. On it, in careful handwriting, was his name, Daniel. He frowned. "What's this?" The woman shrugged. "A kid dropped it off last night. Said it was for you." He tore it open. Inside was a folded note, written on notebook paper. "You didn't just give me $10, you gave me time. My mom didn't have to work that night, 'cause I got everything on the list. She was home when my little sister had a seizure. The doctor said it saved her life. Thank you." And below that, taped to the page, was a single $5 bill. Daniel stared at it for a long time, the store noise fading into a dull hum. The same bill he'd found, the same torn corner, returned, folded, deliberate. He walked outside into the afternoon sun, the paper trembling in his hand. People still called what he did a miracle. But the real miracle was this: how one small act had looped back. Like the world itself had been waiting to finish the sentence he started that night. He looked at the sky, bright and washed clean, and whispered to no one in particular, "I guess it was never about $5. He didn't notice the man across the parking lot watching him, a delivery driver who'd just dropped a package, who'd recognized the look on his face, who'd once lost something precious in this same lot. Later, that driver would find an old photograph near the shopping carts, something that shouldn't have survived the rain, and his own story would begin. The loop was already forming. By the time the week ended, the story had stopped being just a video. It had become a mirror that strangers used to see the part of themselves they'd lost. Reporters called it the $5 lesson. On social media, people stitched the clip with their own stories. Waitresses remembering tips left behind. Veterans talking about how small kindness had saved them once. But for Daniel, all the noise existed at arm's length. What he felt wasn't fame. It was a quiet reckoning. He still worked the same hours, still packed Mason's lunch, still counted coins at the gas station, yet people looked at him differently now. At the hardware store, cashiers smiled wider. At the construction site, the foreman clapped him on the shoulder and said, "World needs more men like you." Even strangers in the grocery aisle would whisper, "That's him." What they didn't see was that Daniel was struggling again. His next paycheck was delayed, Mason needed new shoes for school, and the rent deadline pressed close. Kindness had made him visible, but it hadn't made him richer. One night, sitting at the kitchen table, with unpaid bills spread out, Daniel stared at the envelope the kid had left for him, the letter and the torn $5 bill taped to it. He couldn't bring himself to cash it. It wasn't money anymore. It was something sacred. He'd kept it on the fridge, next to Mason's drawings, but now he felt its weight differently, as if it was asking him, "What will you do next?" That same week his foreman offered an extra weekend shift. The job, repairing drywall at an old neighborhood shelter that was being renovated for low-income families. It didn't pay much, but it was something. He took it. Saturday morning came cold and gray. The shelter sat at the edge of town, brick walls stained by years of rain, windows boarded. A volunteer coordinator handed him gloves and pointed toward a back hallway. "We're setting up a food pantry here," she said. "We could use an extra pair of hands later if you're up for it." He nodded and got to work. The hours passed in rhythm: hammer, scrape, measure. As he worked, he noticed small details: a faded mural on the wall showing children holding hands, a Bible verse half covered by paint, the faint smell of disinfectant. When he stopped to drink water, he saw the donation boxes lined up near the entrance: scanned goods, old toys, and envelopes of cash taped shut. And then on top of one of the boxes, he saw it. A jar, glass, smudged with fingerprints. A handwritten label read, "Emergency Fund, for anyone who needs it." Inside, a few bills were folded neatly. The top one, A5, creased at the corner, looked achingly familiar. He froze. The inked tear on the corner, the faded tin tit, was the same one. The $5 bill. The one from the supermarket. The one that had gone viral, vanished, and somehow found its way back into the world again. He stared, heart pounding. How? One of the volunteers, an older woman stacking cans, noticed his expression. "You can take it if you need," she said kindly. "That's what it's for." A man came in earlier this week and said it was meant to help the next person who'd know what to do with it. He said it came from a good story. Daniel felt a chill move through him, not cold, but recognition. He reached for the jar, fingers brushing the glass. He didn't take the bill. Instead, he pulled out his wallet, thin as always, and added a 10, the same amount he'd once given away. The woman smiled. "That's generous of you." He shrugged, fighting back a tightness in his throat. Just finishing something that started a while ago. That night, as he left the shelter, the city lights shimmered on the wet pavement. He drove home in silence, the radio off. The act itself wasn't big, not something cameras would capture, but it felt bigger than the viral story. It was the echo of it, the proof that kindness doesn't end when the video does. When he got home, Mason was awake on the couch, watching something on his tablet. "Dad," he said, "people online are still talking about you." Daniel smiled faintly. "What are they saying now?" "That you're like a superhero," Mason said. "But I told them you don't have powers. You just notice things other people don't." Daniel froze, looking at his son's small, sleepy face. The words hit deeper than praise ever could. "You just notice things other people don't." He sat beside him, pulling him close. "Maybe that's all the power anyone needs," he said quietly. Mason leaned against him, half asleep, like noticing the $5. Exactly like that. As Mason drifted off, Daniel looked toward the fridge. The envelope was still there. He opened it again, reading the boy's note under the soft kitchen light. "You gave me time." The phrase circled his mind like a haunting melody. He thought of his own father, a man who'd worked 2 jobs, always promising time later, but later never came. Daniel had spent years chasing that lost connection, never realizing that time itself was the truest currency he could give. He stood, turned off the lights, and lingered by Mason's door before heading to bed. In the quiet dark, his thoughts were heavy and clear. Money runs out. Moments don't. That night, he dreamed of the supermarket again, but this time, he was behind the counter. People came in, dropping their own small bills, each one with a name, a story, a reason. The jar kept refilling. He woke up with a strange calm. The next morning, while waiting for coffee to brew, he scrolled through his messages again. Among the thousands of old ones, a new email appeared with a subject line about that $5 bill. It was from an unknown address. The message read, "Hello Mr. Carter, the manager from the shelter. The older woman you met mentioned what you did yesterday. We found something in the donation box after you left, a letter addressed to the man who gave more. You might want to see it." Daniel frowned. A few hours later, he drove back to the shelter. The same woman greeted him, smiling, and handed him an envelope. The handwriting was small and careful, familiar. He opened it. "You don't know me, but my brother was the boy you helped that night. Our mum passed last month. He told me about what you did and how it changed how he saw people. He's been volunteering here ever since. He wanted you to have this." Inside the envelope was a photograph, a blurry frame pulled from the viral footage. Daniel handing the $10 bill to the boy, but someone had drawn a small golden heart between them in pen. On the back, another note. "You showed me that good things can start anywhere, even on the floor." Daniel held the photo for a long time, a lump rising in his throat. Around him, the shelter hummed with quiet purpose, hands sorting food, laughter in the kitchen, footsteps echoing in hallways. Outside, the sun was setting behind the power lines, casting everything in a soft amber glow. He slipped the photo into his wallet behind the worn picture of Mason and exhaled deeply. The world, he thought, has a way of filming what the eyes of heaven already see. He didn't notice the small security camera mounted near the entrance, recording again, quietly, faithfully. Somewhere in the footage, a man placed his hand over a glass jar, smiled to himself, and walked out into the light. The camera lingered, catching the reflection in the glass, a crumpled $5 bill resting beside a brand new one, folded together like two halves of a circle. And in the faint hum of static, if you listened closely, it almost sounded like the start of another story. Oh, ChatGPT dears. The next morning was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels earned. The air was cold and sharp, sunlight breaking through thin clouds, glinting off the frost on his truck's windshield. Daniel stood on the porch with his coffee, the world finally still enough to breathe. Inside, Mason was getting ready for school, humming some cartoon tune under his breath. For once the sound didn't remind Daniel of what he lacked. It reminded him of what he'd already found. He reached into his wallet and touched the photograph, the one the shelter had given him, the blurry image of a man and a boy exchanging something far larger than money. The ink heart drawn between them had bled slightly from being handled too much, but he didn't mind. Things only blurred when they'd been loved. As he watched the street slowly fill with morning live neighbors walking dogs, a mail truck humming past, he realized something had shifted inside him. The story that had begun with a crumpled bill wasn't about luck or even generosity. It was about continuity, about how one simple decision can survive its moment and keep walking in other people's shoes. Mason appeared at the door, backpack crooked on his shoulders. "You coming, Dad?" Daniel smiled. "Yeah, just a second." He poured the last of his coffee onto the grass and set the mug down. "Hey," he said, as his son stepped off the porch. "Do you remember that $5 story? The one from the video. Mason nodded eagerly. Yeah, Daniel said. I think it's still moving somewhere out there. Mason tilted his head, curious, like a ghost. Daniel laughed softly. No, buddy. Like a ripple. He knelt to tie Mason's shoelace, the one that always came undone. Every good thing we do keeps going, even when we don't see where. As they walked toward the truck, Daniel noticed a small object lying on the sidewalk, a coin, shining faintly in the morning light. He bent to pick it up. A simple quarter, nothing special. Still, he turned it over in his fingers, feeling the familiar weight of choice. Want it? He asked Mason. The boy shook his head. You found it. Daniel smiled and pressed it into his hand anyway. Then let's start the next story together. They climbed into the truck, and as the engine started, the coin slipped from Mason's fingers and landed between the seats. Daniel laughed, deciding not to fish it out. Maybe it belonged there, waiting. Across town, in a small diner, the security guard from the supermarket sat eating breakfast. His phone buzzed with a notification. New video, man finds coin, does something unbelievable. He clicked play, smiling before it even began, because he already knew what came next. The loop never really ends. It just changes hands.